to turn our attention to the subject of bioethics. What is bioethics and why is it important? As set forth in Justin Bonnier's most recent article published in Bioethics Today, bioethics exists to help us think clearly about difficult medical decisions, especially those decisions that affect individuals who cannot speak for themselves. At its core, bioethics asks a set of enduring questions: who decides, who bears the risks, and what obligations do we have to protect those most vulnerable? The four core principles in bioethics, also known as the pillars, are autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. Most medical ethical decisions are guided by these four principles. The first principle, autonomy, reflects respect for persons. It is the idea that key decisions about a person's life should, if possible, made by that person rather than anyone else. The second principle, beneficence, is the duty to act in the patient's best interest and take positive steps to do good or promote their well-being. The third principle, non-maleficence, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, non-maleficence is the obligation to do no harm. This requires balancing the benefits of treatment against potential risks. The fourth principle, justice, ensures fairness and equality in the distribution of healthcare resources. Within the context of neonatal circumcision, considerations of bioethics are frequently under-examined and insufficiently integrated into the informed consent process. What you all have in your hands right now, or you should have, is a handout I drafted, which was distributed at the 2025 American Society for Bioethics and Humanities Conference. The handout is called Circumcision, Bioethics and the Law. This handout was not originally intended to be a handout. It was originally a Facebook post I titled Circumcision Checklist. It was a lighthearted twist on the familiar checklist parents prepare before heading to the hospital for delivery. It was intentionally ironic, highlighting the considerations that are often overlooked when parents are making decisions about circumcision. I would like to use this handout as a guide while exploring the principles of bioethics. First on the list is harm. The harmful effects of circumcision are central to any bioethical analysis, as the principle of non-maleficence requires that potential harm be carefully evaluated and clearly established prior to engaging in a broader ethical discussion. I recognize that as an attorney addressing this topic, my background and perspective differ from that of a physician. However, I believe it is precisely within this interdisciplinary intersection that bioethical analysis is most meaningfully tested. That being said, the most effective way to prove harm is to use the testimony of physicians themselves. The following is a series of statements drawn from 3 different physicians addressing the specific issue of harm. Statement by pediatrician Dr. Paul Fleiss, quote, "Foreskin amputation means severing the rich nerve network and all the nerve receptors in the foreskin itself. Circumcision almost always damages or destroys the frenulum. Because the membrane covering the permanently externalized glands is now subject to constant abrasion, irritation, it keratinizes, becoming dry and tough. The nerve endings in the glands are now buried by successive layers of keratinization. Circumcision also severs the lymph vessels, and the loss of the protective foreskin leaves the urinary tract vulnerable to invasion by bacterial and viral pathogens." Statement by urologist Dr. Adrian Carmack, quote, "The hundreds of boys I have seen who needed surgery to repair problems caused by their circumcision are real. The men who lost more parts of their penis than the foreskin are real. The thousands of adult men saying they wish they hadn't been cut are real. Not recognizing that circumcision is harmful is either ignorance or denial. Statement by doctors opposing circumcision. Quote, death is the ultimate harm entailed with any surgical procedure. In cases of a true medical necessity, a certain risk of death may be legitimately acceptable to the patient in the overall picture. However, when a surgery is medically unnecessary, elective, non-therapeutic, cosmetic, and undertaken without the consent of the patient, as is virtually always the case with infant circumcision, any risk of death, no matter how small, is unacceptable. End quote. I'd like to move on to the next items on the list, which also relate to non-maleficence. Number 2, unnecessary. There is absolutely no need to surgically modify a healthy newborn baby or child. Number 3, immoral. Amputating healthy body parts or bodily tissue is fundamentally wrong. Number 4, unethical. It is in direct contravention with the Hippocratic Oath to quote unquote do no harm. Notably, 0% of routine neonatal circumcisions are medically indicated. This means a surgical procedure is being performed on an infant who is not ill. In such cases, the ethical burden shifts significantly. It is no longer enough to demonstrate that a procedure carries some potential benefits. Rather, one must justify why an irreversible intervention is warranted at all in the absence of pathology. From a strictly bioethical standpoint, the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm is not merely a prohibition against catastrophic injury. It encompasses the avoidance of unnecessary bodily intrusion, unnecessary pain, and unnecessary risk. Neonatal circumcision, even when performed under sterile conditions, entails the removal of functional tissue, exposure to procedural pain, and a non-zero risk of complications. These are not hypothetical concerns. They are inherent to the procedure itself. In all other cases of medicine, doctors do not perform prophylactic surgical procedures on healthy infants, based solely on potential future risk reduction, particularly when those risks can be mitigated through less invasive means or addressed if and when they arise. Within the framework of non-maleficence, the threshold for justifying harm is exceptionally high when the patient is vulnerable, the intervention is irreversible, and the indication is non-therapeutic. Statement by Dr. Fleiss, quote, in more than 50 years of pediatric practice, I've never seen a single legitimate reason for foreskin amputation. Never, not one. I think we have been lied to by a lot of people in the medical business, and we politely accepted what they said as facts, end quote. Next on the list is illogical. Illogical. This one speaks for itself. It defies logic to remove a protective layer that protects against infections in order to reduce the likelihood of infections. Make that make sense. Number 6, questionable benefits. The alleged health benefits, if any, are highly contested. In the context of neonatal circumcision, the purported benefits are often framed in terms of risk reduction, decreased incidence of certain infection or diseases over a lifetime. When the baseline risk of a condition is already low, between 1 to 2%, as in the case of UTIs, penile cancer, and transmitted diseases in developed parts of the world, the absolute risk reduction becomes correspondingly small. There is an important distinction between relative and absolute risk reduction. Relative framing can exaggerate clinical significance. The principle of beneficence does not obligate physicians to preemptively remove healthy tissue to guard against low probability or manageable conditions. In most areas of medicine, such an approach would be considered disproportionate. Beneficence is a principle that must be evaluated by weighing benefits against the totality of burdens. And when those benefits are uncertain or contested, as in the case of neonatal circumcision, the core principle of beneficence fails. Perhaps my favorite statement by Dr. Fleiss regarding a physician's role in caring for patients who present no medical indication is the following, quote, "Physicians have a duty to refuse to perform circumcision. They also must educate parents who, out of ignorance or misguidance, request this surgery for their sons. The healthcare professional's obligation is to protect the interest of the child. It is unethical in the extreme to force upon a child an amputation he almost certainly would never have chosen for himself," end quote. Number 7 on the list is no bodily integrity, which deprives the individual child of the right to have one's body whole and intact. Number 8 on the list is no bodily autonomy, deprives the individual child of the right to make free and informed decisions about one's own body. These two relate both to the principle of autonomy and the principle of justice. Respect for patient autonomy, though not directly exercisable by the neonate, does not vanish. It is deferred. Irreversible procedures that are not medically necessary effectively foreclose the individual's future ability to make decisions about their own body. From a justice perspective, permanently removing that choice is inequitable, especially because the quote-unquote procedure is not medically necessary at the time it is performed. This raises a further ethical concern: whether physicians or even parents are justified in making permanent anatomical decisions about a pressing therapeutic imperative. Dr. Anthony Lempert has stated that infant male genital cutting is invariably non-therapeutic and removes functional, erogenous, intimate tissue from people too young to consent or resist. Number 9 on the list is no direct consent. It states proxy consent was never intended to extend to non-therapeutic surgical procedures. As stated again by Dr. Fleiss, the concept of informed parental permission allows for medical interventions in situations of clear and immediate medical necessity only, such as disease, trauma, or deformity. The human penis in its normal, uncircumcised state satisfies none of these requirements, end quote. Number 10 on the list, violation of the Equal Protection Clause, U.S. Constitution. Female children are protected from female genital mutilation, but male and intersex children are not. This directly relates to the principle of justice. Justice asks whether similarly situated individuals are treated alike under moral and legal standards. From a justice standpoint, this raises the question: can two non-consenting minors be treated differently under the law when both are subjected to non-therapeutic genital alteration? If the ethical justification rests on harm prevention and autonomy, justice demands a consistent application of standards, regardless of sex. From a legal perspective, The fact that female children are protected from forced genital cutting, but male and intersex children are not, in my opinion, is a clear violation of the Equal Protection Clause. Both the US Constitution and many states have anti-FGM laws. These laws are inherently gender-specific. Although well-intentioned to protect female children from forced genital cutting, the laws explicitly exclude male and intersex children. In order to equally protect all children from forced genital cutting, these laws must be expanded so that all children are protected equally, regardless of sex. While the legal and bioethical debates will undoubtedly continue for the foreseeable future, one thing's for certain. Physicians who perform neonatal circumcision will go down in history as the biggest disgrace to the field of medicine. Equal protection under the law is a fundamental principle in the American justice system, and it must apply to adults and children alike. The good news is times are changing. And what do I mean by that? First, as we know, Intact Global has filed the first case of its kind challenging the constitutionality of Oregon's anti-FGM laws. This is historic in and of itself. But there is more. Recently, as many of you already know, 2 former members of the American Academy of Pediatrics, both of these doctors were instrumental in drafting the AAP's circumcision policy statement, have publicly retracted their statements. This is huge. By these doctors publicly admitting they were wrong, it opens the door for more meaningful discussions in the medical community regarding not only the ethical considerations regarding neonatal circumcision, but also the harmful effects that no one wants to talk about. It allows for more positive discourse between practitioners and parents. In the end, there is only one truth. Physicians have an affirmative duty to refuse to perform neonatal circumcisions. Thank you.